Welcome to Symphony Sisterhood Breast Cancer Dialogues. I'm Amy Kasher. We're talking today with Jean Campbell, Executive Director and founder of the nonprofit and affiliated blog No Boobs About It. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Today we'll be talking about navigating breast cancer and how this is changing with the increasing use of the internet and with advances in personalized medicine and genomic testing. We'll also be highlighting some of the wonderful resources that No Boobs About It offers to newly diagnosed women and men with breast cancer, as well as breast cancer survivors. Jean, can you tell us a little bit about your own experience with breast cancer and what motivated you to start your No Boobs About It blog and subsequent nonprofit?
Surely. My first breast cancer experience was in 1999. A routine mammography picked up something suspicious for cancer, and subsequent needle biopsy was inconclusive, so it was time to do a surgical biopsy. I entered the procedure with the knowledge that it would be, whatever they removed would be evaluated while I was out on the table, and if indeed it was malignant, they would give me a lumpectomy.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not wake me up and talk to me about it. And so when I woke up, I saw this small little bandage, and I said, oh, well, I guess it's something benign. And then I felt this pain under my arm, and I found the second bandage, and that's when I knew it had been cancer, because that's where they did the sentinel node.
Mm-hmm.
And so that cancer treatment was followed by 36 radiation treatments, and then 5 years once a day on tamoxifen. About a year or so, 2 years, I suppose, after I had breast cancer, I became involved as a volunteer with the American Cancer Society, and then in 2005, I began working for the American Cancer Society, starting a patient navigator program for them in 14 city hospitals in New York. And then I left the program, I think it was about 2009, and in September of 2009, another routine mammography found something suspicious for cancer in my other breast, and it was a second primary. So this one was extremely small. It was less than 1 centimeter. And I had just opted at that point in time, after all the years of mammographies and all the tests and all, and I just said, I've had it. Take them both off. And so I had a bilateral mastectomy, no reconstruction, and did not require any further treatment after that. So that was basically my 2 experiences with breast cancer. I guess it was probably about 3 months after I had had my second bout with breast cancer. I was talking to my GYN, and she said, between your 2 breast cancers and the fact that you had all that experience of working with the American Cancer Society and meeting thousands of women with breast cancer in the hospitals, why don't you start a blog? And I said, I don't know. I mean, in reality, there are so many women out there telling their story and sharing with people on the internet, and I just don't feel that there's anything I can contribute in that way. So she asked me to think about it, and I said, well, if I come up with anything that I feel would be worth my doing, I'll think about it. And so then it was one of these things where people who knew people who were just diagnosed were saying, hey, can they call you? And I was pretty much doing patient navigation the way I used to do it in the hospital via the telephone. And I thought, well, maybe there is a need here. And I thought, but no, I'm not just going to tell my story and that's it. Basically, I want to provide resources because I was working on what I knew personally I needed during my 2 cancers, and certainly what I learned from all of the women and some of the men that I met in the hospitals and what they needed when they were diagnosed, when they were going through treatment, when treatment was over. And so I've tried to pattern No Boobs About It after what I learned from those experiences with my years in the hospital.
Wow,
so that was kind of how I did it.
That is really, really amazing. One of the central themes of your website is navigating breast cancer. How do
Yes.
you frame the different stages of navigating breast cancer?
I think the first one is just that sucker punch where you find out that you have breast cancer. And you really need to be able to talk to people who've been there and who can kind of get you grounded for what lies ahead. So I would try that, the diagnosis and pre-treatment. And then, of course, there's a whole treatment stage and all that you go through when that's going on. And then there's that no man's land where you go from active treatment to survivor, and all of a sudden you feel like you've been cut loose in space. And so that's kind of how I would look at it. And then, of course, there's that need in survivorship to reinvent yourself. Because once you've had breast cancer, it's pretty darn tough to just pick up where you left off. I mean, you're not the same person. You've faced a life-threatening illness, and you don't look the same to yourself. You don't feel the same, and emotionally, you've been through hell and back. So it's a very different place and time, and it's all about, okay, what do I want to do here? What's important to me now? And I've got to give myself permission to do that. And that's basically how I would think of it.
It certainly seems to be how you experienced it as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Jean, there are an increasing number of online support groups, including American Cancer Society's Cancer Survivors Network, BreastCancer.org, My Breast Cancer Team, the Symphony Sisterhood, and many, many others. And No Boobs About It is launching an online peer-to-peer support group in 2013 as well. How and why do you think online support groups work?
I think that there's a number of answers to that one. First and foremost is that, unfortunately, with over 200,000 plus people being diagnosed every year with breast cancer, there's no short supply of people who need support. And I think that more and more people are turning to the Internet to get information and to find resources and support. I always call it the middle of the night, when I think, I know I myself and other people, and it certainly happened to me, where I will find out I've got emails in the morning. Someone wrote me at 2 or 3 in the morning when they couldn't sleep and they really needed to write to somebody or talk to somebody. I think that there's a certain anonymity to a support group that might be online, in terms of you don't have to be physically present. Of course, you could always use Skype if you so chose. But I think there's this opportunity to share with people, especially if you have a rare form of breast cancer, such as inflammatory breast cancer, where there may not be anyone with that particular type of cancer in a support group anywhere in your state. And I think sometimes it's very hard with people to be able to get out to support groups. I've certainly witnessed that in my years of being with American Cancer, where it's kind of the same people coming over and over again, and you get a few new people, and then, I mean, life gets in the way. Either you don't feel well enough when you're in treatment to go to a support group, or you go to a support group, as I did after my first cancer at Sloan Kettering, and it's time limited. It's 1 week, 10 weeks that you go one time a week. And I just think that sometimes people need more than that. I mean, my feature, I think we're going to end up more on the end of survivorship workshops and how to kind of reinvent yourself and launch. I would always offer the service if someone wanted to talk, that it would be an opportunity to do so. And I'm still kind of ironing that out. I've been doing some focus groups with people and finding out, what do you really want? What do you really need? And so that's kind of how we're working there. I think the biggest challenge for anyone who is a provider is reaching the women who are hidden. It takes a certain awareness to get on the web and find support groups and feel comfortable doing it. I think of the thousands of women I met and spent time with as a navigator, And most of them either didn't have access to a computer or were not comfortable using a computer or culturally were not comfortable with the concept. And these are women are pretty much unserved.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while there, I had the site in both Mandarin Chinese and in Spanish, and eventually that sort of dwindled off. What I would do in terms of support groups is if there are women who need another language, well, the bottom line is I do have those kinds of connections from my days as a navigator, because we had 7 staff people and 75 volunteers, all of whom were survivors. Mm. So that's a pool that I can draw from. Mm-hmm. But I'm not quite sure yet. The biggest thing is, how do you outreach? How do you get the word out to these women? Mm-hmm. All right, that remains the challenge. It was easier going into the hospitals because they were coming in for treatment, so it was sort of a captive audience.
Right. How do you think newly diagnosed breast cancer patients and survivors can get the most out of these online groups?
That's a tough question. I think that people shop online. They look around, and I think they probably go to a couple of different sites and see how comfortable they are, and if they feel they would like to get into it. But once again, it takes a certain awareness and a certain sophistication to know how to look and where to look and how to utilize it. I think that you almost need referrals from an organization that has the trust and the ear of newly diagnosed. I know when I was first diagnosed first time around, I called the 24-hour hotline at Why Me? Mm-hmm. And of course, unfortunately, Why Me is no longer around. But they were wonderful. They were positively wonderful. And this woman spent 45 minutes with me, and she talked me right down into reality again. And she had a laundry list of places that I could call and internet sites that I could go to, as well as some warnings about, don't believe everything you read and all this other business. So I don't know of how many of those organizations exist. I know there's the American Cancer Society, and I don't know who else is maintaining a hotline anymore. I know that most of them are maintaining limited time hotlines, all right? So to answer that question, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
I think it's hit or miss.
Switching
Yes. Until there's a better way of just having one central point of entry into the system. Whether it's a case of all the organizations that provide online support, networking, getting together and saying, we'll make everybody aware on our various sites of the others who are doing it too.
Right. And
because it is not one size fits all.
Right.
I mean, there's different sites fit the needs of different people.
Right, exactly. Switching gears just a little bit, you're somebody who stays on top of the latest research in breast cancer testing and treatment. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about recent advances in personalized medicine and genomic testing for breast cancer?
I think that it is a wave of the future that hopefully will be successful because, yes, chemo works, yes, radiation works, but it's a heck of a ride. Mm-hmm. And the side effects are brutal in many cases. Mm-hmm. So being able to have our own bodies stimulated to work to either prevent or cure breast cancer would be a godsend. Mm-hmm. I hear all the time from people who are working on different projects, and I know that there's a couple who are working in clinical trials now on vaccines, and there are others who are talking about using various ways of stimulating our own bodies to react and protect us. And I just hope it works because it just sounds so much more humane than what we've got right now.
How are you finding access to new information about tumor biology and genomics is changing the way in which people are navigating breast cancer?
One of the ways is that I do subscribe to certain journals, and I also am working with an organization out of Israel called MedAdvisor, all right? And they do searches to find what's going on. But I'm also very fortunate that now I'm getting phone calls from people who are in the field who are doing it. And they are saying, we're working on such and such. Would you consider allowing us to do a post? And I say, sure, I need to check it out, but absolutely. So that it's not as difficult, and I'm on a lot of the government feeds, so that I do track that way. I track through journals, and I am getting responses from people working in the field.
And we hear about how some patients are more informed on the latest research than their doctor is. How does a patient deal with that? What advice can you offer patients when this happens?
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Well, let's say a patient has been up all night doing research on the latest tests that exist, and they're not offered by their doctor. How
well, a lot of them won't be. I think that here's the bottom line. Unless you're going to a cancer center, which also does research, I don't think that every doctor who is an oncologist or a surgeon is necessarily going to be as up on these things as a doctor who would be in a major treatment center, such as Johns Hopkins or Sloan Kettering or NYU or the hospital in Texas, all right? I think that the major cancer centers are the ones who hopefully would be the most current on these things. I think if someone goes in and their doctor doesn't know about it, well, fine, doesn't mean the doctor is just out of it. It just means that with all he's got to do, he's not up on that research. And I think that a person with the aid of the Internet can certainly get the literature on it, offer to give it to the doctor, and ask the doctor. And if the doctor is receptive to it, some doctors are not, okay? If he's not receptive, you might want to talk to another doctor.
Right, and get a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So we know being diagnosed with breast cancer can feel very overwhelming, and then one is faced with an overwhelming array of support services in the hospital, in the community, online, and elsewhere. Are there different resources that you feel are more or less helpful at the time of first diagnosis?
I know what you're saying, but I did not have the experience either time that I was overwhelmed with all these resources. I maybe it's different where you are, but I mean, I'm sitting in New York City, and my first time around, I wasn't offered resource one. All right. Granted, that was 14 years ago. I went to NYU 4 years ago. There were some wonderful things there in terms of making it easier for me to get through things, but I was not offered a support group. I mean, a social worker didn't come see me and tell me about a support group. I used my own group of people that I knew through my navigator days. My fellow navigators were my support group. And so I did not feel there was this cadre of support everywhere. I did go on the web. I mean, half the stuff doesn't apply. And another quarter you're not too sure of, all right? And so maybe there's a couple of sites that you're comfortable with. But to me, anyway, a lot of them, it's all generalities. How could it be otherwise? All right? No one has your specific type of cancer in your way, at your age, at your time, all these other things. So what you really need is a support group of people who are literally walking your same path so that you can identify, not compare, but identify. I also think that there has to be some guidance, because I think that the level of anxiety that somebody has at the time of diagnosis. And also, I really don't know how you can, at that point in time, screen out what's suitable and not suitable for you. I mean, you don't know. I mean, the second time around was infinitely easier for me and much less stressful because, one, I had been through it before, and two, because I had been with American Cancer, I was an educated consumer, I had done navigation, I had lots of people I could turn to. I mean, if I compare my first to my second, my first, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where to turn. As I say, the woman from Wine Me just really was super. But I think there's a tremendous need for hotlines because when you need help, you need help. You can't put needing help on a schedule. So I don't think I can answer that effectively for you because I haven't had that experience, and no one I've spoken to has had that experience.
We've heard from a number of women who say that especially the number of online resources or sources of information can be overwhelming. And they just, like you said, not everybody has the same situation. In fact, no two situations are exactly alike.
Exactly.
And that it's overwhelming because so much of the information, you're not sure how relevant it is exactly to your situation.
Well, you don't know where to turn. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, but how valuable is it? And you're not in a position to judge that. I mean, you really need some sort of a hotline connected with a viable organization that can steer you in the right direction, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you so much. This is so helpful, Jean. We're so
You're
grateful
welcome.
for your thoughts about how navigating breast cancer is changing with increasing use of the internet and advances in personalized medicine. And that concludes our dialogue for today, and we look forward to talking with you in the future. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.